What's illegal, but people continue to do openly without consequences? Littering. Depressed areas or cities typically have high volumes of litter. I own a company that does some FHA and HUD things, and we go to many of these cities. You can just drive down the road and watch people throw trash out of their cars. They live there, and that is just crazy to me. People driving while on their phone. I would expand on this to include pretty much all of people's common driving habits. Wage theft almost never gets meaningful consequences. Stealing $1 million from your employees by shorting their hours and doing other intentional labor code and other violations should be treated precisely as harshly as an employee walking out with a safe with $1 million in it. Use tax. Where I live, if you buy something in another state without sales tax, but bring it back to your home state, you have to send your home state the tax you should have paid if bought locally, even if it's pants. Let me get right on that. Parking in such a way you don't just have a wheel on the curb, but actively block the whole pavement. A wheelchair using neighbor gets so fed up of it, and I can't blame her. Well, for the past 10 years, open corruption in the Australian government. Media barely addressed it, and when they did, nothing happened or forgot about it. Hauling more than the legal weight limit in dump trucks. I did a project a few years ago for my former employer because they noticed all the contractors that they hired were carrying more than the legal weight limit. This is a big issue because these trucks have increased stopping distances and are more likely to injure/kill people in the cars they hit. My company was pissed because they didn't want to be legally responsible if there were an accident. They had me analyze how much it would cost to buy a fleet of dump trucks. But it turns out you can't make much money hauling at the legal limit, so all dump trucks carry like twice the limit and just take the fines when weigh stations are open, because it is way cheaper. Pretty messed up. Honestly, I felt like I did humanity a disservice telling them it wouldn't be worth it. If you ever get hit by a dump truck you can almost certainly sue them for being above the weight limit, but nobody really knows this. Note, this depends on the legal weight limits in your region. But I know this to be true for most of the Northeast US. Tell their employees they can't talk about their wages with cowhawkers. In some areas, feeding the meter racker putting more money in a parking meter when it's close to running out of time. The reason parking meters have a time limit, 1 hour, 2 hours, is because they want to force cars to leave after that time, generally when the parking is for commercial businesses, so they can have turnover for customers. If you maximum it out, then come back and add more time, you're extending your car's stay past that limit and can, in theory, be ticketed. Pretty much no one enforces it, however. Pirating various media, movies, music, games, etc. I've never heard of anybody getting any kind of serious punishment for this. The most I heard was someone being given a notice by their ICE for exceeding the fair use cap on their downloads. I remember reading one horror story about a grandmother whose grandkids downloaded the theme song to some TV show, and she wound up being sued for thousands. This was back in the Napster/LimeWire days. I was always nervous about downloading stuff, but this was the only example I could ever find, and I really don't even know if it's true. Pump and dumps, Ponzi schemes, large market manipulation and fraud, yet we keep bailing out and supporting the financial institutions that enable, support and participate in it. I'd like to also add insider trading. On top of that, politicians trading on non-public knowledge should be illegal but isn't. Teenagers drinking alcohol or doing substances and doing absolute stupid People refuse to leash their dogs even in city parks or streets, despite the fact that parks have signs everywhere stating it's illegal and you'll receive a fine. I unfortunately think it just doesn't get enforced, and everyone thinks their dog is the best dog ever. It is extremely annoying when you have a reactive dog that freaks the hell out when your good boy comes at us at a full sprint. Leash your dogs. As an Akita owner, it pisses me off so much, but my dog is gentle, yeah, but mine might kill yours if the first contact doesn't go well. People think that just because their dog doesn't look hostile doesn't mean that their attitude isn't. If it rushes straight to a reactive dog, it's often taken as aggression. Congressmen lying to the public for parties in political gain. They say it is free speech, but all federal employees and all legislators and those in their employ sign an agreement to limit their public speech and to follow particular ethic rules to avoid any kind of appearance of partisanship or corruption. If a complaint is found to be legitimate, it can be referred to the Dodge for prosecution. Despite volunteering to take this oath, certain legislators have found fame by attacking others in a partisan manner. Even spreading misinformation about vaccines is also illegal for senators/reps. Civil asset forfeiture is a blatantly facial unconstitutional violation of civil rights, and every judge, prosecutor, legislator, and law enforcement officer that pretends otherwise is engaged in an aggressive, violent criminal conspiracy. Being robbed of all your cash on the highway has been regarded as a socially invalid act and a principle so foundational that it predates the idea of laws, and a prohibition against this act by government made it into the Bill of Rights. Downloading music. Though streaming services have made it less necessary to download albums, we all had on Napster phase where we scoured the service for obscure tracks and classic albums. You've probably still got a library of illegal things buried somewhere on your hard drive, just don't let Metallica find out about it. Playing poker with friends. Yep, your poker night could very well be illegal, though you'd have to be inviting some pretty high rollers. The Illegal Gambling Act of 1970 states that it has to have revenue of more than $2,000 for one day of gambling to technically break the law, but it's not impossible that a long night of high-stakes Texas Hold'em could lead you down that path of illegality. Sharing your password. Maybe you tried to save a friend from having to illegally download movies by sharing your Netflix password with them, and in the process broke the law yourself. It's actually considered a federal crime to share your passwords for subscription services, not that you haven't already done it. Sharing medication. You knew that old bottle of Vicodin you got for your foot surgery would come in handy someday, and sure enough, your buddy who was visiting threw his back out and couldn't make it to the doctors until he got back home. But even if it helped him get through the return flight with a lot less pain, you were breaking the law by helping him out. Rehypothecating shares on the stock market to dilute natural pricing through genuine supply and demand, so they can profit on the collapse of otherwise perfectly healthy companies, sending thousands of people into poverty and unemployment, just so hedge funds can profit on shorting the stock. Long ago the powers that be decided profiting on market volatility didn't guarantee enough returns, so they rigged the whole market in their favor. You are all being robbed blind. The very people that you vote into office want to change the world. Do it one share at a time. Throwing out your cell phone. Speaking of disposing of something properly, e-waste is illegal in many places due to the chemicals and nasty metals that they produce over the long run, which can end up in water supplies and cause other health risks. That being said, you were totally lazy and just threw your phone into the garbage when you finished with it, didn't you? Rolling through a stop sign. Speaking of stop signs, this is a bad habit of anyone who has cruised through the suburbs trying to get back home after a long day, or taken the advice from WAS that sent you going through stop sign filled intersections that slowed you down much more than if you just stayed in the stop and go traffic of the main streets. It's against the law, but you know you've done it, and as a bonus, if you are a bike rider then you have absolutely done this before, looking both ways then cruising through the stop sign to get on your way. 9 times out of 10 you won't run into any issues, but be extra sure there are no cops around, just in case.